There's a special kind of sting reserved for people betrayed over card tricks and glitter. I'm Leo D'Amico, professional magician, part-time children's party wrangler, and full-time hater of Bluetooth speakers. Long story, balloon animals were involved. For 10 years, I've been doing shows in our little coastal town, festivals, school assemblies, the occasional wedding where the groom thinks it's a good idea to magically appear and then forgets he's scared of confined spaces. For most of those 10 years, I also had a partner, Max. Max was the charismatic one, apparently. He did the crowd banter, the dramatic flourishes, the hair flips. I did the mechanics, the slights, the gimmicks, the timing. We were Leo and Max, masters of misdirection, which is funny because the biggest misdirection was me thinking we were equals. Our signature routine was called the turning tide, an illusion where the volunteer's signed card ended up sealed inside a bottle that had been sitting on stage from the very beginning, filled with sand and water. It looked impossible. It was impossible, unless you knew about a very specific custom-made bottle, 3 hidden magnets, and one very patient stagehand named Carlos. I designed the whole thing, built it, fine-tuned it with the obsessive focus of a raccoon stealing shiny objects. Max called it our masterpiece. I believed him. Everything changed the night he said, "I have news." If anyone ever says, "I have news," with that particular twinkle in their eye, just start stretching. You're about to be emotionally tackled. We were packing up after a county fair gig, sweaty, sticky, smelling faintly of popcorn and Triumph, when Max dropped it. "I got a call," he said, "from Mystic Masters. They want me for their new televised talent competition." I blinked. "You mean us, right? Like Leo and Max?" He winced. The kind of wince people do right before they tell you the dog you grew up with actually ran away 12 years ago. "They only want one magician in each slot," he said. "They saw some of my solo videos and think I've got star quality. But you know, this is good for both of us. I'll represent the act. Represent the act." My stomach did a vanishing act. "So you'll be performing the turning tide," I said carefully. He shrugged. "They asked for my best closer, and we're a team, man. What's mine is yours. What's yours is mine, right?" Ah, yes. The famous phrase engraved on every betrayal. I wanted to argue. But I also knew how this industry worked. Exposure meant bookings, and bookings meant Carlos could finally buy a car that didn't sound like a dragon coughing. "Right," I said. "What's yours is mine." 2 weeks later, I found out he'd flown to the city. Not with me, not with Carlos. With a new assistant named Lexi, a dancer with perfect eyeliner and a talent for making anything look glamorous, including picking up dropped cards. There were photos on social media. Max and Lexi in front of the studio sign. Max and Lexi rehearsing on a big stage. Max and Lexi holding my bottle for my finale. The caption, "So proud to share my original illusion, the turning tide, with the world." I stared at that "my" so long the letters blurred. Carlos called. "You see this?" he asked. "I did," I said. "You want me to drive over there and switch all his confetti with whipped cream?" I considered it. Tempting, but no. He wants to go big? Fine. We'll go bigger, quietly. Because here's the thing about magic. It's built on secrets. And I had the best one. What Max didn't know, because he never bothered with the mechanics, was that the turning tide had 2 versions. Version A, the one we always used, made him look amazing. Version B did not. I originally built version B as a joke. A failsafe. It still ended with the signed card inside the bottle, but getting there was a chaos parade of misfires and messy reveals. It was how I tested which steps were fragile, and which steps, if triggered in the wrong order, made the entire routine collapse in the most public way possible, like, say, on national television. All it required was a small adjustment to the bottle's hidden compartment and a different orientation for the magnets. Details Max never learned, because while I was soldering in my garage, he was practicing his smolder in the mirror. The real challenge was access. Lucky for me, Max had one weakness I knew I could exploit, and it wasn't his fondness for poetic monologues. It was his lack of boundaries with tech. Max reused the same password for everything. Years ago, in a moment of "we're a team" or no secrets, he told me his go-to, abracadabra. 3. I wish I were kidding. I logged into his cloud storage, found the file labeled Tide Bottle Specs Final Do Not Touch, downloaded the diagrams, and confirmed what I suspected. He'd commissioned a second copy of the bottle from my original blueprints. Exactly the same. Which meant I knew exactly how to flip it into version B. I couldn't physically reach the prop, but you know who could. Carlos. Carlos, stagehand saint, had a cousin who worked at the studio, a lighting tech. The kind of guy who could walk backstage, wave at a clipboard, and nobody would stop him as long as he looked mildly stressed. We devised a plan that was 60% logistics and 40% caffeine. On the morning of the taping, Carlos's cousin Marco texted us a photo, the backstage table, the bottle, the cards, the smug smile on Max's poster in the hallway. Got eyes on the prop, Marco wrote. 5 minutes until they break for lunch. Plenty of time, Carlos said, which is the kind of optimistic nonsense that makes me nervous. But somehow, improbably, they pulled it off. During the lunch break, Marco accidentally unplugged a lighting rig, called for backup, and while everyone was looking up, Carlos walked in, swapped the bottle for an identical one he'd modified according to my version B specs, and walked out like he was thinking about sandwiches. I watched through shaky video updates, my heart pounding like a drum solo. That's it, Carlos whispered in his last clip, crouched behind a stack of crates. We're set. You sure about this? No, I texted back, but I'm committed. The episode aired 2 weeks later. I invited half the town to watch at my place. Not because I needed witnesses, though yes, but because I knew Max would absolutely eat up the fact that his hometown fans were tuning in. We piled into my living room, neighbors, Carlos, 3 kids from my magic workshop, and Mrs. Azharta Patel from the bakery next door, who brought cupcakes shaped like rabbits. When Max finally appeared on screen, the room erupted in applause. Someone shouted, "We know him," like we were at a concert. He looked good, I'll admit. Confident, charming, wearing the suit we used to joke was his magician armor. He breezed through a couple of smaller tricks, then smiled at the judges. And now, he said, I'd like to finish with my original illusion, something I call the turning tide. Carlos snorted so loudly he scared one of the cupcakes. Max explained the premise. The camera zoomed in on the bottle. The volunteer signed a card. The audience oohed. The judges leaned forward. And then everything went wrong. First, the card vanished, and then fell visibly out of his sleeve. The crowd laughed, thinking it was part of the act. He tried to pivot, moving into the next phase of the routine, but the magnet system had been re-rigged. Instead of secretly pulling the card into place, it yanked half the deck into an impossible cluster that popped out of his jacket pocket like a flock of paper pigeons. The audience laughed harder. Max's smile faltered. He resorted to the final reveal, the bottle, the dramatic centerpiece, the trick that could save him. He smashed it open with a flourish. Out spilled a soggy playing card that was not signed, wet sand, and a small strip of paper that floated lazily down to the stage. The camera zoomed in. On the paper, in waterproof ink, were the words, "Magic designed by Leo D'Amico." The room in my house went silent for one glorious second. Then Carlos screamed, "That's my boy," and everyone else lost it. On screen, Max went pale. One of the judges raised an eyebrow. "Who's Leo D'Amico?" she asked. I took a bite of rabbit-shaped cupcake and thought, well, since you asked. The fallout was slower, but just as satisfying. Viewers flooded social media. Some thought it was part of the act. Others did internet detective work and found my website. Small, humble, very much not on national television. They binge-watched my show clips. They emailed. They booked me. Someone made fan art of the strip of paper like it was a superhero logo. The producers of Mystic Masters reached out. Apparently they'd had questions about originality, about ownership, about why a solo performer had an illusion that traced back to another magician in a small town with a very detailed blog post about designing a trick called the turning tide. They invited me onto the show, not as a contestant, as a consultant. "Your mechanics are excellent," the head producer said on our call. "We'd like to feature more behind-the-scenes engineering, showcase the craft." "And Max?" I asked. There was a pause. "We won't be moving forward with him," she said diplomatically. "I didn't ruin his life. I didn't want to. Max still does magic, smaller shows, different routines. He sent me an email once, apologizing, sort of. Something about getting carried away and thinking we'd both benefit. I didn't reply. Not out of cruelty, just Closure. These days, I perform under my own name. I teach kids how to palm coins and also how not to reuse passwords. Carlos gets to brag that he ran ops on a national TV scandal, and the turning tide? I retired it. Instead, my new closing trick is something I call the honest lie, an illusion built around the idea that some deceptions are beautiful and some are just selfish, and magic works best when everyone's in on the agreement to be fooled. Right before the finale, I tell the audience, magic is built on secrets, but credit? That should never disappear. Then I make their signed card appear in a place nobody expects, taped under their own chair, because sometimes the real trick isn't making things vanish. It's putting them back where they always should have been and letting the whole world see it.